It's that time for a new series Spotlight. Hello and welcome to my channel. This is the start of a new series I'm going to be doing periodically called Series Spotlight, where I talk about a series that I either read before Booktube, super early in my channel, or potentially just a series I haven't talked about on the channel that I'd like to. I want to spotlight series that I've enjoyed, but also give you a good picture of what the series is, who it's for, talk about both the good and the bad, and give you just the right expectations with a series. And in this first one, we're going to be talking about the Licanius trilogy by James Islington, which was published between 2014 and 2019 and consists of The Shadow of What Was Lost, An Echo of Things to Come, and The Light of All That Falls. And the reason I wanted to talk about this series now is because it started getting a lot more attention, being picked up again a lot more because of Islington's new book, The Will of the Many, which, side note, is fantastic. And while I quite enjoyed Licanius, and I really loved Will of the Many, they're quite different. And so I think that going in with the right expectations really help readers get the most out of the experience. I have found myself sharing my thoughts a lot on this series of late as people pick it up or people are more interested in it. So I figured it'd be a great time to do this and do this series spotlight. So let's talk Licanius, the good, the bad, and the overall recommendation. Let's start with a brief summary of what the Licanius trilogy is about. We start off with The Shadow of What Was Lost, which takes place 20 years after the end of a protracted war, where the former rulers, called the Augurs, were overthrown and basically wiped out completely. The Augurs were very powerful magic users, and they could, among other things, see into the future, but their powers started to fail, and other factions were quick to jump in and take power for themselves. Now, the lesser magic users, called the Gifted, are closely regulated and they have to obey due to magically controlled tenets that keep them in line and keep them in close control. Davian, who is one such Gifted, our main character, is central to our story at the start, and he's struggling with his gifted powers, getting them to work and kind of come out and reveal themselves, though it seems he may have some other abilities which are a little bit troubling. And then when some violence forces him and his friends into flight, the grand and intricate adventure begins. So let's start with what this series is and what it does very well. So this is a very plot-focused series with a very complex plot interwoven with different POVs, a lot of different plot lines and different timelines, flashbacks, that sort of thing. And there's also quite a lot of world building that's done well and makes the world feel very rich. You've probably heard me say a bunch of times, but I really enjoy world building, and so it's something that I really appreciate, and you get a lot of it here, but just a ton going on. And while the book starts 20 years after the downfall of the Augurs, there are thousands of years of history that's also really relevant, and over the course of the series we get a lot of that information via flashbacks, and it adds quite a lot to the world and the story, but it never really feels, at least to me, like you're just having info just dumped on you, and so I think it works out well. If you like wild plots, books that just encourage you to create wild theories, try to unravel the answers, figure out everything that's going on with all the twists and the turns that the plot is taking you on, this will likely be a series that you enjoy. The thing I'll also mention, because I know we all, like readers, we have to crack fun at blurbs and how they're so often not accurate, but the blurb on this one says it's for, perfect for fans of Robert Jordan, mentions Brandon Sanderson, and that's kind of people that are saying we'll enjoy the series. And for the most part, I do think I have to agree, which I know is a little surprising since it's a blurb, but it's actually pretty true. And when I first saw this, I randomly found this, and a cover stands out quite a bit. It's not super intricate, but just the bright colors stands out. I pick it up and I see, love the Wheel of Time, this is about to become your new favorite series, which, like, no, that's an exaggeration, of course, but that, and then kind of elsewhere there's some comparison to Sanderson. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll check this out and see what I think. And while the style definitely leans a bit more toward early Sanderson, there's a lot of inspiration clearly visible from The Wheel of Time. Some of the stuff that I've already said probably might sound a little bit familiar. It's a world where magic users are bound by unbreakable oaths, where the Dark Lord was locked away behind a magical barrier. And hey, there's even, it's a world that has another Aerith Ocean similar to The Wheel of Time. I made way back a video kind of joking in my headcanon about how it was somehow connected and this is just another age, which is a huge stretch because it's not that close by any means, but there's a lot there. So if you like some of the elements that you explore in the Wheel of Time, there's a lot here that you can find that you can see as the inspiration. But for me, it still is a positive thing because I enjoyed the elements that were used for inspiration. But I think that Islington did a fantastic job expanding on those ideas, making them really his own and doing a lot of unique things and adding a ton of his own unique and original world building and magic and all kinds of different things into this. So it didn't really ever feel like it was derivative or repetitive or like it was ripping anything off. It was just like, oh, I can definitely see where you got some of this inspiration, but there's a lot more to it as well. Now, while there is a lot I enjoy about this series, I do think it's important to talk about the negatives because I want you, like I said in the intro, to have the right expectations. And that's something that I feel like otherwise you might be disappointed with some of the things. Because the first big thing is, this is a debut, and it feels like it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's one of those books that you read and you're like, yeah, okay, I can see this is a newer author who's still kind of figuring out style, who's still kind of figuring these things out. And if you go to this right after Will of the Many, you might be disappointed because Islington leveled up big time with Will of the Many. In my opinion, he improved on literally every aspect of his writing from Licanius to Will of the Many. And so if you're expecting it to be the same quality, you're going to be disappointed. And I think making sure that you're not having that expectation will help a lot as well here. Now, there are a few particular things that I do want to specifically address because from what I've seen, they tend to be the big sticking points for people, what prevent people from potentially enjoying these as much as they may otherwise. And the first thing is, I mentioned that this is a very plot-driven book, and the plot is very complex. This is something that, for me, a lot of times was a positive, but it can also become a negative because things do get a bit convoluted here and there. And overall, I feel like the author tried to do a little bit too much in this trilogy. It's something that I feel like if you don't like that much stuff going on, like I said, if you like the crazy theories trying to follow along, it can be a really good thing, and it worked out for me. But yeah, if you don't like when it gets that crazy or convoluted, it can end up being a little bit of a negative. And so it really is something that is probably too much for a trilogy, or probably too much for somebody who's, as a debut author. And it feels like one of those series that for me is very good, but it really did have the potential to be great had it been written like 10 years later. And especially after reading Will of the Many, I would love to read this series completely rewritten now, because I feel like it would probably end up in my top 10 series, which it's not at this point, but it felt like it had a lot of potential and still something that I really enjoyed. It's an author who's still trying to figure things out, but it's extremely engaging, and ultimately it did work for me. And so I think, too, with all of the craziness and all of the dangling threads and that sort of thing as well, I will note that I think Islington did a fantastic job tying those up for the most part and making sure that you get a satisfying answers and conclusion, barring one thing, but we'll get there. The second thing that I want to talk about is the characters. Those of you that are character-focused readers are likely not going to have a fantastic time with this one, and that just kind of is what it is. I've mentioned a few times this is a very plot-driven book. It's very focused on the plot and the world building, and the characters aren't really a huge focus here. And it goes a little bit further than that, in my opinion, because the big issue for me with this trilogy is the characters just feel very shallow. You still absolutely can connect with some, and it's not to say, look, the characters are bad. They're not badly written, and they're not just like bad characters, but it's just something where we don't get as much depth as I would like personally, and that was my big kind of complaint, despite really enjoying the trilogy. And so people who really like, that's what you read for, you want to latch onto the characters, you might still really enjoy Will of the Many, because that does once again, every aspect improved, but this one is really not focused as much on the characters, specifically with like the character relationships. Something I made a joke on is there were several times throughout where two characters, to like show that they're bonding or like their relationship is progressing, they'll have a really nice conversation, which they hadn't had in a while, and that's just kind of like some of those bits, some of those lines, it just felt like somebody, the author's still kind of figuring it out, and he figured it out later. But for me, the plot in the world definitely kept me engaged enough to look past the character issues, but they are there, and I know that won't be the case for everyone, where if you're more character focused, it might not work out as well for you. Now, the final big thing that I do need to briefly mention is there is a very controversial thing for book 3, because there's a really big plot line that happens off screen. yeah, there's no way around it. It's a big thing, it's important, and it's basically some characters who kind of went off to go do something, and then we didn't hear from them, and then what they did comes up and ends up being relevant kind of out of nowhere, and the author's aware of this. Originally the plan was to write a whole another book as like a book 2.5 or something, explaining this, or potentially even series, like kind of showing like, oh, what happened off when these characters were doing this thing, how did this all occur. As far as I know, that's no longer happening because I never saw any other further updates, and all the updates have been about the new series. Really, I can't complain because the new series seems like it's going to be really great. So this is kind of just one that you're going to have to overlook. It does make it come off as something being very, very convenient, a bit Deus Ex Machina a little bit there as well. So you just kind of have to overlook it and think like, okay, stuff happened off screen. And I know, like for me too, that's something that afterwards I'm just like, really? There's nothing? And then I looked up like, oh, there's going to be more. I don't think the more is coming at this point, so it's something to be aware of for sure. Now, I don't want to feel like I'm just harping on the negatives here. And like I said, I really did enjoy this trilogy quite a lot. And that's where I wanted to say, you know, there are some of these negative things, but overall for me, I still enjoyed it. But I want you to have, like I said, the right expectations. I do feel very confidently that had this been written like 10 years later, had this been, you know, maybe not his debut trilogy, but when he did even his second trilogy based on the Jump, I feel like this would easily be in my top 10 series of all time because reading it like this is so great. It has so much potential. It just is, it's from a debut author and it has some kinks, it has some rough patches that need to be worked out. But it's a very fun series. It's so imaginative, and I think people who really enjoy sprawling worlds and crazy plots will just have a heck of a lot of fun with this series in general. Islington crams so much into these books, and yes, I know they're long books, but there's still just so much there, and there's so much that's kind of crammed in. And so while it might be a bit too much to handle at times, ultimately it created what, for me, was a very enjoyable end product. So I absolutely recommend checking out this series. I hope that this video helps give you the right expectations. If you do, check it out if you've not read it, or if you have read the series, or maybe you read it like me when it first came out as well. Hopefully this was still an interesting watch, something for you to see if you agree with me or not on everything with this series. Also, just one more time, I have to mention, check out Will of the Many if you haven't though, because it's so good. So fantastic. Like I said, it's really, really great, but maybe try this one first, and then keep in mind that if this doesn't work for you, Will of the Many is very different and is like just on another level, so still check that out too. It's really, really great. But that's really it for what I had wanting to talk here about the Licanius trilogy. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like I said, I know I've been seeing this pop up a lot more, people reading it, and I've seen definitely some people who are a bit disappointed with it, and that's kind of where I wanted to set the expectations, let you know what kind of series it is, what you're going to get into, let you know some of the negatives so that you're aware of it, and it's not going to really like take you out of it or like be a deal breaker necessarily, or if you know that after hearing that it's not going to be for you, also, you know, helps you hopefully make the right decision. But like I said, I really enjoyed this series. It's one that I do definitely plan to reread at some point too, just because I had a lot of fun with it, and I hope that this will be helpful for more people to check it out as well. That's it for this one though. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description as always for the Wizardly Enclave Discord. If you want to chat books, whether these books, other books, really anything at all, it's a lot of fun and we would love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.